name is Carly Gasparini. I'm the Executive Director of the Brandon Neighborhood Renewal Corporation here in Brandon, obviously. We're really excited to have the conference here in Brandon. Pretty much everyone from our office is here today to help because we were really excited that you chose Brandon, that MNPHA chose Brandon as their location for the conference this year. We really hope that you enjoyed the firehouse last night, which is one of our gems of the city, and that you're enjoying the rest of your time here in Brandon. So thank you, panelists, for joining us today. The topic is what housing associations can achieve and voices of affordable housing in Canada. And so, of course, all of the associations that our panelists represent play an important role in speaking very often for us. And so this conversation is about what we need them to say and how we need them to say it. And so, as Christina mentioned, and as we're connecting, this is an interactive, I've been calling it a game show because I think that's pretty fun. But it is interactive, so there'll be an opportunity for you to vote in. We'll ask a few questions first, and then you'll vote in so that we can get some of your knowledge and inform some of the decisions. So we'll just start, we'll go through the line, just starting with Ami. And could each of you please provide a brief description of your association? What's its history, its membership, and the major programs that you have running?
I am the board president for the Ontario Nonprofit Housing Association, or we call it ONFA. ONFA was founded in 1988. It's our 30-year anniversary this year, so we're very excited about that. We are a member-funded association, similar to MNPHA, and we support strong community-based affordable housing in Ontario. We do represent housing providers from all over the province, from all the way in northern Ontario to the southwesternmost tip of Ontario, which is where I'm from in Windsor, Essex. We do believe that secure, decent, and affordable housing is a human right and a fundamental social determinant of health, and it has the power to change lives and is the foundation for vibrant and successful communities. Our membership is quite wide-ranging. We have the largest housing provider in the country, Toronto Community Housing, as one of our members, with over 60,000 units. And we also have smaller providers for 12 units, so quite the range in membership. Our members house more than 400,000 low and moderate income people in approximately 170,000 homes all throughout the province. And some of our members are also supportive housing agencies that provide mental health services or other services to persons with disabilities, so the full range. We have members that are owned municipally as well. In Ontario, housing has come down to the municipal level, so we have quite a few members that are municipally owned, and then we have other nonprofits and larger agencies as well. We have about 5 main programs. Similar to MNPHA, we do a lot of the same activities. We provide education and member support. We provide information and updates through bi-weekly and monthly newsletters. We also hold an annual conference, which is actually happening in about 2 weeks' time. It's the largest conference for nonprofit housing providers in the country. So we get quite the broad swath of people coming, and we're very excited about that this year. We do policy, research, government relations, and we also have a Best Deals program that's a bulk purchasing program for our members. So I think we do a lot of the same activities, and with some of the changes that are happening nationally and provincially, we are working towards some advocacy efforts with other housing associations throughout the country as well, and with CMHC.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for the invitation to come here. This is personally my first time ever in Brandon, so it's a pleasure to be here. Although I was sitting yesterday beside the mayor of Gimli, and I think he was kind of making a hint that maybe you want to come to Gimli for your next conference. Something to think about. CHRA, the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association, we're the national voice for social, affordable, and nonprofit housing in Canada. So one way I say it is MNPHA's national counterpart in a sense. This is our 50th anniversary, in fact, in 2018. So whereas me is 30 years old, that's why I'm a lot more wrinkly and haggard looking, is we're 20 years older, so that explains that. In terms of our membership, we too are very diverse. We represent nonprofit housing providers. We represent all 13 provincial and territorial housing departments. We represent certain nonprofit, supportive nonprofit organizations. We, within our membership, have a number of municipalities, both small and large. So Mayor Gimley, you might want to consider joining. And we also have individuals and certain businesses. So we're a fairly wide swath of membership. Although having said that, one of our challenges is that despite being a national association with so many different categories, we only have about 300 members. In fact, many people, even though we're a 50-year-old organization, many people still haven't even heard of CHRA, which is something we need to work on. Among the things we do, just like MNPHA, like BCMPHA, advocacy and the policy supports that go with that are at the top of the list. We'll talk later today about, well, you talked yesterday a lot about the national housing strategy. It is not coincidence that that national strategy was focused on the nonprofit and social side of the housing spectrum. And we'll talk about some of the efforts that we've done in that regard. But aside from that GR and advocacy role, we also pursue a lot of research, both domestic and international. And as an example of that, in a couple of weeks, we have a webinar looking at social housing in Vienna as a case study for how social housing can really play an impact. We have a national Indigenous caucus, whereby the needs of rural, urban, and northern Indigenous housing providers come to the fore. And that caucus has increasingly played a more active research and advocacy role in and of itself. We too do a lot of networking, provide networking opportunities, mainly through our national congress, which in 2019 will be in Victoria, so hopefully some of you can make it. But not just as an individual networking opportunity. One thing that we started this, or we kicked off this summer, is a new alliance called the Canadian Alliance for Nonprofit Housing Associations, whereby MNPHA, BCMPHA, MNPHA, and all the other provincial housing nonprofit associations have come, and CHRA, have come together. And we meet several times throughout the year to share best practices, ideas, so that Christina in Manitoba doesn't necessarily have to reinvent wheels. She can learn and take ideas from other provincial associations. So those are, and we also have a number of programs as well. We have a national mentoring program for your young professionals and a number of other programs. So it's a lot we do with a very small and limited staff, but as I hopefully we'll talk about in the next few minutes, I think we've been showing results and impact, particularly over the last 2 years.
Great, thank you. So BCMPHA is the umbrella organization representing nonprofits, the nonprofit housing sector in BC. We were founded in 1993 at the kind of outset of the federal government capping social housing subsidies at $2 billion a year. So our original executive director, this awesome woman named Alice Sundberg, started the organization to develop a more unified voice for advocacy in the sector. Prior to that, we had a lot of our nonprofits just doing individual advocacy. So there was definitely the need to kind of unify the voice there. So it's actually really funny. She got in a van and just kind of drove around BC signing up members. So since that time, we've grown to over 600 members, including nonprofit housing societies primarily, businesses, other associations, and individuals. So we provide a broad range of housing types, from emergency shelters to transition and transitional housing, supportive housing, and permanent affordable housing. So together, we manage more than 60,000 units across the province in over 2,500 buildings. So BCMPHA, I'll talk about our events a little bit later, but we offer 14 partner programs. So I won't be able to talk about them all right now, but I'll just touch on a few of the big ones here. And I just want to mention too that we derive a significant proportion of our revenues from these partner programs. So around 30% of our our revenues come from them. So the first one that I want to talk about is this thing called the Pooling for Increased Earnings, or PI program. So we partner with a couple of credit unions in BC, Van City and Coast Capital Credit Union. And it provides BC and MNPHA members the opportunity to pool their operating accounts into one large pool, so as to receive better interest rates and lower service fees. We have various group insurance programs. I'll talk about a couple of them here. The first is a tenant insurance program. So we partnered with Marsh Canada on this, and the plan is great. It has an annual premium of $150 compared to what private residential tenants would pay, around $300. So it's a really great deal for our members who are serving low-income tenants. We also have another partnership with Marsh around bulk purchasing of insurance for our members. So this reduces the rates of what members would pay individually. We're currently in the process of rolling out a telecom program, so we've partnered with TELUS in BC to provide a 40% reduction off retail rates of internet and cable. So that's a really huge benefit to a lot of low-income folks in our buildings. We also do a lot of work around energy efficiency as well. So we have a kind of sophisticated asset management department that has been working over the last several years to develop new programs. One of the biggest ones that we've been working on in the last couple of years is with the Columbia Basin Trust and BC Housing. So we launched a large energy retrofit program for valued at $1.6 million to develop retrofits for more remote and rural nonprofits in the Kootenay region. So you can replace boilers and heating and ventilation, air conditioning systems, things like that. And then the final one that I just kind of want to touch on right now is MNPHA. So MNPHA is a social purpose mutual fund that was developed in 2002. BC and MNPHA joined the board in 2014. There's a little bit of a reorganization there. So it provides nonprofit housing providers with the option to invest their capital reserves and operating dollars into various social purpose investments. So it provides a few different funds with different risk levels and different terms, but it allows our members to really kind of tailor it to their specific needs. So we're seeing rates of return on those products anywhere from about 3 to 10%, depending on the risk level in the stream there. So those are kind of some of the big partner programs that we have. Thank you.
Thanks, that was great. So kind of as a follow-up, all of you are membership-based associations, as you mentioned, and whether in advocacy, partnership development, educational sessions, you're representing a large and diverse sector. What are some of the ways you engage members in your activity? And what would you say is most effective, and then what is most challenging? Maybe we'll start with Jeff this time, just to
Switch it up.
switch it up.
You know, as the National Association, engaging with members is obviously something we need to do. It is something we do, but it's challenging. When you're as big as country of Canada, doing that kind of engagement, in particular in-person engagement, can be pretty tough. As I said, we have an annual conference once a year, and we've tried to use that conference as an opportunity to hear from and engage with our members. Earlier this year, we had, for example, a session on getting feedback from members on what we should be talking to politicians about for the 2019 federal election. This coming year, we're going to be doing an engagement session on our upcoming strategic plan. So, we try and use those opportunities kind of as best we can. But because we only do that once a year, really we rely on that sort of virtual engagement. So, the surveys, the email requests. But I got to say, although that's never as good as in person, it can result in some pretty important and significant impacts. And I'll just give one example. Yesterday you heard a lot about the National Housing Strategy. When that strategy was first being developed in early 2016, the federal government announced a consultation on it, a national consultation. And as an organization, national organization, we too went out to our members and said, okay, what do you think we should be advocating for within that national strategy? So we did sort of a virtual engagement session. We got feedback via a survey and just email responses. And our members were very forthright and told us, look, there's no one solution, no one size fits all solution. We need a toolkit approach. We need to fix our existing stock and protect our existing stock. We need to protect affordability via subsidies. We need to protect the existing asset base. We need to do some more research. They essentially listed off a whole wide range of things. And via that feedback and via that engagement, we produced a paper, a response to the federal government, which we made public and submitted in October of 2016. A month later, we had Evan Siddall, the CEO of CMHC, on a webinar, and he said, you know, we've gotten hundreds and hundreds of responses, obviously, to this national strategy, but I've only personally read a small handful. And he said, CHRA, yours was one, and he said, you guys are on the right track. We're very much aligned in our thinking here. And so when the national strategy was released about a year ago, you know, the alignment between what we had recommended via our members and what the government did was really unmistakable. I mean, a lot of the national strategy almost appeared like a cut and paste from our own submission. In fact, I think that's why the bureaucrats were kind of happy with us. They just said, okay, you know, you're doing our work for us. So we knew, based on that, and literally at one point we did a side-by-side analysis, we knew that that engagement with our members had made a difference. And I know it's corny, as can all be, that you hear from, you know, in the States right now and in Canada, you hear like, oh, it's important to vote because voting matters. And it's true, it does. But I would argue the same thing goes for membership engagement. You know, it's easy to say, oh, you know, whatever happens in Ottawa will happen. I can't really make any impact on that. I can't make a difference. That's nonsense. You know, a lot of time, a lot of the changes that get made, especially at a national level, are based on those one-on-one feedbacks that we hear, that we can communicate with federal decision makers. So from us, from our side as associations, it's absolutely key. But from our member side, participating in those engagement opportunities is just as valuable. Because I think we demonstrated with that little pop-up banner there with the National Housing Strategy that members can and frankly should be able to have a say in the policies of their association and subsequently by decision makers. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. I screwed it up.
So a major way that we engage our members is through events. Back in 2014, we kind of heard from our membership that we weren't providing enough opportunity for members to network locally. So, you know, much of our sector, they're small providers, they have a building or two, and don't necessarily have the resources to come down to Vancouver every year for a conference. So as a result, we developed another one-day conference stream called the Regional Education and Networking Trade Show, or RENTS for short. So as to better engage our members in more rural settings. So we do 4 of those a year in our different board governance regions. So one in the interior, one in the north, one on the island, and then one in the lower mainland. We also put on Housing Central, so that's our main conference. And shameless plug, I have some shameless save the dates right here. So it's now become Canada's largest affordable conference. I don't know if there's like a championship title or something for that.
You two can go ahead.
Yeah. So that has over 1,200 delegates, over 100 education sessions. So these are really our opportunity to foster networking with membership, shared learning, innovation within the sector. And it's really been the main platform for member engagement since the inception of BC&PHA. So we also do kind of some other things. We do email blasts every couple weeks called Housing Updates. So that just kind of provides information to our membership on new issues affecting the sector. We do a weekly roundup of news articles that we send out every week for issues pertaining to the affordable housing sector. And we do a quarterly magazine called InfoLink, which also updates our members. So currently we're kind of in the process of developing a membership survey to get more feedback on how we can better support our members. We've had a strong focus on advocacy at our association over the last several years. And we're really seeing the fruits of that now through significant provincial resources coming online. And so we're really kind of, wanting to understand a little bit more how we can engage our membership to support capacity building and, understand where their needs are. But, it definitely is a challenge, membership engagement. We have a lot of our membership, again, located in rural parts of the province. It can be difficult for us to get out to them. And, many are very small and they lack financial resources. So, in addition, we're a relatively small team at BC MPHA, and we can't respond to everything that I think our membership wants us to as well. So those are some challenges.
So similar to BC MPHA, one of the main vehicles we use to engage with members is conferences and events as well. And we do have our conference coming up in 2 weeks' time. And so a lot of people in the province, they'll say, oh, I'm going to MNPHA, which means that they're coming to our conference, and that's how they identify us. And it provides an opportunity to engage with members for networking and education and advocacy. We find the education supports to be very valuable to our members. When we did a membership survey earlier in the year, and the educational courses, networking and advocacy are the top areas that members really find value in. What we find is a real diversity in what members need. Our smaller providers who may not have a full-time HR person or even a full-time property management clerk or property management administrator, they really benefit from the day-to-day operational courses that we provide and training that we provide. Our larger members, they usually have those resources on site in-house within their own organization, so they don't necessarily need that intense level of operational day-to-day support, but they do value our advocacy efforts. And similar to what Jeff spoke about, when the National Housing Strategy consultation came up, we also engaged with our members to see what were their concerns and their needs, and everything from expiry of operating agreements to the huge capital repairs and maintenance backlog that exists to funding new development. Those were all topics that came up, and we were really happy to see that in the National Housing Strategy. And looking forward to this year and next, we are looking at ways that our members can take advantage of what is in the National Housing Strategy and actually develop new affordable housing units. The biggest challenge that we find, similar to BC, is because of the geography, we have rural members that are in parts of the province that are hard to access geographically, and then we have a number of providers that are in the Greater Toronto area that are kind of clustered together and are more accessible. So in addition to the conference, we do regional meetings as well. We go out to various communities in the province and do a 1 or 2 day educational session to talk about updates in legislation, new things coming down the pipeline. We talk about our bulk purchasing program and changes to that. And we also solicit our members' feedback to inform the activities of what we're going to be doing in the following year. We heavily engage with the province as well. We had a change in provincial government this year. As most of you know, Doug Ford is our premier, and housing is not on the provincial agenda right now, which is very concerning to us. And there has been a little bit of a vacuum in terms of communication from the province in terms of what they're doing. So,
except for buck of beer.
yes, buck of beer, right. And so, we're working through that. MNPHA is a nonpartisan organization. We work with whoever comes into power and obviously want to secure affordable housing for all of our members. So in the past with the Liberal government, we worked very closely with them when new legislation was coming down the pipeline. They would interact with us first, and we would then solicit our members' feedback and inform some of the decisions that were coming down from a policy perspective. I'm not sure, to be honest, how that's going to work with this new government. We are beginning to forge those relationships, and we hope that we have that same level of engagement. But those are pieces that we're looking at, and that is going to be a big challenge for us this year and in the next few years.
Thank you. That's, I think as of tomorrow, you'll also be able to smoke weed anywhere you want. So, some other things going on. All right, now it is time for our first round of the game show. I'm super excited. So we've heard some really great ideas come from kind of other organizations across the country, but now it's time to have your voice in terms of MNPHA and put, put them to the test, but certainly provide them with some important feedback. So this round is 2 questions. The first is, how would you like to see MNPHA engage members more? So text in A, should you think more online or distance content such as webinar, online resources? B, if you hold regular regional meetings. C, hold more frequent educational sessions. Or D, meet with members, staff, and boards at their organizations. So again, the one that you think is the most, the one you like the most is the one you vote for. Look at that.
We need music.
That's true, right?
We can sing.
Wait till it stabilizes, I suppose. I mean, it's pretty clear. Oh,
Or not.
or not. Ah. So exciting, really. Certainly, the ability to use online, some of the rural community stuff is certainly a piece for Manitoba, given our geography across the province. So that kind of makes sense that more online content is certainly helpful, and then the educational sessions too. The idea of sharing best practices, of course. All right.
And just while you're waiting, someone had a good point here that you just mentioned the cannabis becoming legal tomorrow, that next year's Munchies with the Mayors may have a whole something to think about.
It's like, instead of the red drink ticket, there'll be a green. Okay, next question is, what barriers exist to your engagement in MNPHA? So A would be cost, and again, you're choosing the one that you think is the most relevant answer. Cost, so the cost of membership or attending educational sessions or the conference. 2 is distance, so the fact that the office is in Winnipeg, the distance you have. Time and capacity to get involved. D, information, so you don't know how to engage. And E is interest or relevance. So, yep. Probably predictable too, the answers, but helpful. Time and capacity, that is the thing. We're all asked to do so much, right? But good feedback that D is getting lots of answers too. Everybody's in? All right. Thank you. That was exciting, I think, anyway. So we'll go back to the panelists, and we'll, I think, Brian, we haven't started with you yet. So the question now is, what are some of the range of services your association provides to nonprofit housing providers? And what are some that have been particularly successful, and what are some that maybe you no longer do because they were less successful?
So I think on a program level, our partner programs that I was mentioning before have been a huge success for the sector. They save a lot of members money through developing economies of scale. We are also developing work around our asset management team with going into buildings and doing building condition assessments. So where they're going into buildings and kind of assessing the conditions so as to create a business case for deep energy retrofits. So this is a really proactive step because it's more costly in the end if these things are not addressed early. We're also developing new programs around capital planning and helping our members kind of navigate through the expiry of operating agreement and kind of understanding maintenance requirements moving forward in a world where there's no subsidy. And I think also too, just our events have been quite valuable as well, especially our main conference, as I was mentioning before. From my perspective though, being in the kind of policy and research world, toot my own horn here, but our advocacy efforts have been really successful, really valuable over the last several years. So we've been active in developing a research program at BC MPHA to support evidence-based decision-making in BC around the housing sector. So back in 2012, we developed a rental housing demand projection study. So that looked at each regional district in the province and projected out rental housing demand for 25 years. So it gave us a good handle on what needed to be built where, moving into the future. We've supplemented that research with this project called the Canadian Rental Housing Index. So this is kind of a comprehensive database of rental housing information that provides important information for planning and policy making in the sector. It establishes housing needs and kind of a baseline for understanding what needs to be built in what communities. And a lot of this research, it culminated in us developing a 10-year plan for affordable housing in BC, which we released in 2017. So it was a fully costed plan with targets to reduce homelessness and housing insecurity throughout the province of British Columbia. So it described really what needs to be built for what groups, where and how much it would cost. And you know, combined with our government relations activities, we were really successful in being able to advocate to government. And so with the NDP's most recent budget in 2018, we saw a commitment to build 114,000 affordable rental housing units in BC. So that was a huge win for us provincially.
So on this this topic, in terms of what is the most valuable service for our members, it really depends on the size and scale of our members, I would say. Our larger members, it is what they find the most valuable, the advocacy, the research, and the government relations piece. Because, like I mentioned, they have the other parts in-house in their own operations and don't necessarily need the operational support that some of our smaller members need. And similar to what BC MPHA did, we also put together an affordable housing plan in Ontario, specifically for the most recent provincial election, and it was fully costed and called for 69,000 units to be built over the next 10 years in the province, which is quite a lofty goal, but it was evidence-based on research and on trends that exist in the province right now. We also partnered with the BC Association on the Canadian Rental Housing Index. And that index, if you haven't actually taken a look at it, go online. I forget what the website is.
Rentalhousingindex.ca.
There you go. And you can look up your municipality, your neighborhood, and see what housing affordability is in your area. We urged people to do that in the provincial election. We had a social media campaign with the hashtag Vote Housing, and had stickers and decals and that sort of thing that we were handing out to people and members. And we encourage them to go online and access this tool to see what housing affordability looked like in their community, to spur a conversation. For our larger members in Ontario that are owned by municipalities, the Toronto Community Housing, the Ottawa Community Housings, for example, a lot of these organizations have municipal councillors on their board, so they can't get into as much advocacy in GR as they possibly could because of that relationship of councillors on their board. So we try to do that on their behalf, and they do find that very valuable. Switching to our smaller members, we have a membership support line. It's a 1-800 number that people can call. We also have an email address for members to call into, where they can ask a simple question like, can I evict a tenant for such and such? Or I have a tenant with mental health concerns. How do I access funding for them? Or I have an operating agreement that's expiring. What do I do? So we've put together various toolkits and guides. We have a lot of publications on our website that deal with the day-to-day stuff, the pest control, the fire code, asset management, the cannabis legalization that's going to happen tomorrow. That's a big question for a lot of housing providers, and we have a session at our conference to talk about that, because there's a lot of diversity of opinion as to what can we allow tenants to do. Can you actually allow them to grow the four plants in their units and smoking or vaping in their unit? Can you evict tenants, and on what basis can you evict them? So there's a lot of conversations going on about that right now. And one of the ways we engage with our members and actually get information out there is we do a bi-weekly e-alert that contains updates of everything that's going on provincially in terms of legislation, advocacy, and has highlights from toolkits that we're putting out. I myself, as a housing provider, I find those e-alerts to be very valuable. In the day-to-day, it's so hard to keep up with everything that's going on. And so I review those newsletters regularly to make sure I know what's going on with the sector. And I know a lot of our members that are smaller and have volunteer boards where the boards are quite involved in the operations. They find that service valuable as well. One piece that we're working with our members on is succession planning. So in our sector, what we're finding is there's a lot of people who have been in the industry for quite a long time, 20 years, 30 years, even longer, and they're getting close to retirement. And there's questions about who's going to take over, who's going to be the next generation that kind of continues doing that good work that needs to be done. And it has been difficult to recruit people into the industry. A lot of people don't even think about nonprofit housing or affordable housing as a career path. So we actually work with boards. We send out a staff person to work with boards on succession planning and guiding them through that process. We're starting to look at things like brokering relationships between providers to providers. So if we know that one housing provider is going to have retirement coming up or some kind of turnover, we are looking at matching them up to other providers to see if there are resources or shared things that they can do together. We haven't fully started that yet, but that's something that we're looking at. We are looking at expanding our bulk purchasing program. In Ontario, we have another organization called Housing Services Corporation, which is almost like a provincial entity, but it is the province has mandated that certain purchases go through that corporation. So bulk insurance, pooled assets, and that sort of thing. So we don't actually offer that service similar to BC MNPHA. But our providers that aren't required to go through that, we are looking at providing them with services outside of that program in terms of asset management and insurance as well.
So in terms of as a national association, in terms of some of the services we get good feedback on, very similar to what my colleagues have said. Our national conference is always deemed as very high level, sort of at a very macro level. And just like Brian, I too brought save the dates for Victoria for next year. They're in the back. We do webinars on various research activities and research dissemination. We get good feedback on those. Our Indigenous caucus is really seen as the sort of point of expertise for Indigenous housing in Canada. So its activities get good feedback. But of all of that, I would say the thing that most people say they join CHRA for and look to us for is to serve as that national voice, in particular with the federal government, which is also, though, our biggest challenge. And what I mean by that is, although it's important to be the national voice, and what that means is you have to have a good research capacity, a good policy development capacity. As we talked about earlier, you have to engage with your members so that you're actually representing the people that you're being paid to represent. But the challenge is for many of you, and for housing providers frankly across the country, when you're doing your day-to-day activities, you rarely, for the most part, most people rarely think about national level policies and programs and services and so forth. Most people tend to think locally. I know I sit on as was mentioned in my way too long bio, I sit on a youth homelessness organization in Ottawa, which is actually just about to build our first ever project of housing units. And the people that I sit with on the board the other day were all talking about what the city could offer, and someone put their hand up and talked about what the province could offer. No one even was thinking about federal programs, and this is even with all the new programs under the national strategy. So it's so far tends to be fairly removed from day-to-day thinking in terms of what sort of national level opportunities exist. And even when people think about CMHC, it tends to be the local representatives that you deal with. People generally don't think about, oh, wait a minute, we can actually influence the design of these national programs. And so that's where we step in, because that is the role we play, and we do it via the policy and the research and the engagement and the relationship building that we have with the politicians and the public officials and so forth. But most people don't really think about that at a grassroots level. So that's where we have a challenge with membership, is that question of relevancy. And yes, serving as a national voice, that sounds great, it looks good on a postcard, but what does that mean for me as a local housing provider? And I think that job will get a little bit easier now that we have nice pop-up banners like that celebrating the national housing strategy, and people are just now starting to take advantage of the programs. And we as an organization are really up to our eyeballs, because with now the implementation of that national strategy, part of our job is to influence the implementation of it. And we know there's a lot of problems with it, whether it's the co-investment fund, whether Brian was just talking about some of the research programs. There are certain things we still need to advocate for quite strongly, including, by the way, the one big unfinished piece of the strategy, which is the Indigenous component, which really hasn't been announced yet. So there's still a lot of work to do, and that will remain our biggest service and our biggest value add to members over the coming year. What we need to do, though, is a better job of connecting the dots, so that people on the ground, whether you're in Brandon or Winnipeg or Portage la Prairie or wherever, that you understand that, yeah, the things we're doing kind of in far off Ottawa will make a difference for you, and by you participating in our association, you can hopefully have a say, not just to improve your organizations, but other housing providers across Canada.
Great, thanks. That's, I feel like you set yourself up, you heard all the really great things that people are doing. Now you ask, people are going to want it all. So this brings us to round two. I'll remind you, the winner of round two will have their points doubled to go into round three. So it's a big one. So it's back up on the board there. The question is, what services do you appreciate most from MNPHA? So A, the conference, B, educational sessions, C, member benefits, including building condition assessment grants, Assiniboine credit union account benefits, people first, people cooperation, wellness, and HR services. D, the expiry of operating agreements planning guide. E, the newsletter. F, government relations, that's advocacy, sharing information regarding government policies and funding programs. Or G, networking and partnership building. Oh, yeah, that's it. Go ahead and vote.
can vote twice for this one because we have lots of options.
You can vote twice. See, I told you it would be doubled. All right, we kind of have a bit of a tie going. The conference, really people are having a great time, probably because it's in Brandon this year, just saying. And of course, the opportunity to network and partnership build, which very often happens here at the conference too, so. All right, we'll go to the next question then. And so that leads us to, what services would you like to see provided more or in addition to what's happening? So A, more educational sessions. B, policy templates and resources, so HR policy or board policies templates. C, membership benefits, so buying programs, insurance programs, some of which we heard about today. D, research. E, government relations and advocacy work. F, hands-on support, so helping to plan, develop assistance, policy development with your boards, I would imagine. Staff and board member recruitment, maybe some of the succession planning that we heard about would fall under there. And H, networking opportunities. So, okay. I don't even know that I said research, and it's getting lots of love, so yeah, there's a lot of answers. Again, you could probably vote twice for this one.
Yeah.
Double the points, really.
We're watching.
Right. Still going. Who's still typing?
Give a lot of options.
All right, so that brings us back to, I've just watched Christina take pictures too, in case you can't see her over there. She's taking pictures of all the screens. She will have all the answers, really, that she needs. Okay, back to our panelists. So we'll start back at Ami. What do you see the strongest recent success of your organization is? And how did your membership benefit from the success? And how did they contribute to its success?
So I think I mentioned this one already, but similar to BC MPHA, we put together an affordable housing plan for Ontario for the most recent provincial election. It was fully costed. It had various methods to raise revenues to fund the development of new affordable housing. So it wasn't this pie in the sky type of idea. It was actually fully costed, and I thought it was quite practical as well. Members were involved through engagement by listening to what it was that they needed and talking about some of the challenges that they faced. That toolkit was actually reviewed by our provincial government. When the new government was sworn in, I had a phone call with the Minister of Housing, and he said, "Oh yeah, I read your affordable housing plan, and yeah, it's quite lofty. We'll have to take a look at that." And so it's out there. They know it's out there. We got some very good press coverage from it. Our executive director, Marlene Coffey, did quite a bit of media and press. So we found that to be very successful. Our hashtag Vote Housing had good trending on social media, and we were able to connect with a lot of our members through social media and technology as well. So that's an area that we're continuing to look at to see how we can reach some of our rural members that don't get to access all of the services in person. On the education side, we recently put together 2 courses, one that was actually funded through a grant from the provincial government called Ready, Set, Rebuild, and we're actually launching it at our conference in 2 weeks. And it's basically a course that talks about development and how you get your organization for development, redevelopment, and revitalization of your assets. When we talked to the province about some of our members' concerns, it was capacity building and how do we take advantage of the programs that are coming through the pipeline on the education and resource side. As nonprofit housing providers, I think we're very, very good on the day-to-day operational side. We know our communities, we know our tenants, we know what we need to do to support them. But when it comes to building new or revitalizing our assets, that can be challenging. You're almost looking at real estate development, which is daunting. So this course actually is a full 2-day course. It is going to walk through members on everything from the financial analysis that's needed, the supply and demand analysis that's needed, and that you actually need that for the co-investment fund application. You have to evidence the need and demand four-year build. It's going to talk about how development works, how real estate financing works, how you rent up a building, how you actually put a tenant management plan into place, and all of those sorts of things. So we're very excited about that course. And it's been oversubscribed, so we know that members are looking to get into that course. So we're hoping to also have an online version of it as well. And we also developed another toolkit called Financing Our Future. So one of the things that we heard from our members was they are challenged on the financial side on having toolkits, templates, and resources even for a set of financials or for KPIs or some kind of reporting to the board. So we put a toolkit together for that, and that has been very valuable to our members as well.
So I've said it a couple times, so it'd be kind of silly of me not to say it again, but I think our strongest success, over the past couple of years was the National Housing Strategy. And I say that from a couple quick perspectives. In late 2015, when Justin Trudeau got elected, he made it quite clear that he wanted to see the federal government get back into the affordable housing game. And that wasn't by coincidence. We had pushed really hard during that federal election in 2015, and I think folks in Manitoba helped with that. We really pushed to get that issue on their agenda. But although they knew that they wanted a national strategy, essentially they started the development of it with this, essentially a blank sheet of paper, which they then needed to fill in. And throughout that initial consultation on the strategy, particularly in 2016 and in 17, I can tell you there was a hell of a lot of battles and debates, and discussions about what the content and the focus of that strategy should be. And let me tell you, there was a lot of pressure put on the federal government to really focus on private home affordability, which made sense, right? I mean, at the time, and still today, you're seeing in the papers and in the headlines, house prices in Toronto and Vancouver are going through the roof. Politically, it's an important issue. 70% of Canadians are in the private home ownership market. It would have kind of politically, from a purely political standpoint, made sense for the feds to focus on private ownership. They didn't. In fact, this title, National Housing Strategy, I think it's a bit of a bizarre title. Some friends have asked me, hey, I want to buy a first home. What is this national strategy going to do for me? And my response is, well, nothing. It's not for you. The title of this really should have been the National Social Housing Strategy, because that really was the focus. I mean, of that $40 billion over 10 years that's to be invested, the focus really is on the non-for-profit sector. And that was not coincidence. We made, I think, I would argue, our association, others, allied associations, made a really strong push, and we really told a good story as to why we needed this strategy to focus on non-for-profit and the social sector. And that's what happened. So I take that as a bit of a win for us, to really just the fact that we focused that strategy on the issues that mattered to the folks in this room. And the other thing, and I alluded to this earlier, was the content of that. Again, just as there were fights and debates and discussions around the focus of it, there were similar arguments and discussions about the content and what specific tools should be contained in that strategy. And even within the social and affordable sector, there was not necessarily agreement on what those specific tools should be. Even to this day, we're debating and discussing, what the rollout of some of those should be. But as I said earlier, when we looked at the strategy when it was unveiled last November, and we lined it up with the specific recommendations that our association had made, I mean, you can just sort of draw the lines. And in some cases, it was like literally specific stuff. The Federal Lands Initiative, the right to housing legislation, which was like literally a copy and paste of what we'd recommended in a letter to the Minister Duclos. It was alluded to yesterday, this new technical resource center, which once it's up and running, by the way, this was an idea we had championed back in 2014, and it was included. This is going to be a new center that will provide essentially technical services to any housing provider in the country who would like to sort of improve and modernize and transition their operations. We were in an all-day negotiation on that Friday, which is why I also needed a very stiff drink on Friday night. But there'll be an announcement on that coming soon. But anyway, another example of where, the alignment was just almost in sync. So given all that, without patting ourselves too much in the back, because this was our association in partnership with other associations, and of course all of you on the ground, I think we demonstrated again that associations can provide value and have impact. And by the way, one last comment. It absolutely does not surprise me that in that one of those earlier polls you all just did, that the reason members don't engage as much is because you just don't have the time, and that's completely normal and natural. But I think that's where the value of a strong association comes into play. You don't have the time to be going up to the legislature or Parliament Hill to be talking about these things. That's what we do. And so again, I'm hoping that we're able to sort of strengthen our collective bodies and associations so that we can play that better role and have that stronger voice for all of you.
That's great. I think these two stole my thunder a little bit too, because I'm going to talk about our affordable housing plan. So, that was really a success for us when the NDP adopted many of the recommendations. So, in particular, the commitment to build 114,000 units over a 10-year period. And just to contextualize that a little bit, the national strategy commits to build 100,000 units nationally over a 10-year period. So a lot of people kind of scoffed at the idea of us being able to do that. So it was really a big win for us when we saw that there was that commitment within the last budget. So there's all sorts of housing initiatives happening now as a result of that. We have a large modular homes program to support homelessness, supportive housing, lots of permanent, long-term, affordable options. So it's going to be about $7 billion commitment by the provincial government over a 10-year period. We've also seen, a lot of new kind of policy initiatives within the context of BC around allowing municipalities to zone for rental tenure. So that's a new authority that they're going to be able to have, and it's the first time in North America that's been implemented. So, apart from the kind of wins that we've had on the advocacy side, another big win or success for the association is we hired a fundraiser, a dedicated fundraiser last year, and our sponsorship revenue increased by 38% to $400,000. So that was definitely something that was a big win for us this year. Yeah.
Perfect.
I was just saying, I'm looking for something green here so that I can show my envy at that.
Okay, so I appreciate I'm breaking from my really hilarious game show bit, but this question here is kind of like the long answer on an exam after you prepared for a multiple choice. So we're actually going to leave this one up, and we're going to ask the next question. You actually have to type in your whole answer. It's an open-ended question, and I think they'll pop up as you send them. So you don't need to write a novel or anything, but please feel free, they get collected somehow. So the question is, what are the issues you would like to see MNPHA advocate on? And so again, we'll just leave it up there. So again, what are the issues you'd like to see MNPHA advocate on? And so you can write what you'd like, and we'll continue with the question, and then they'll pop up as you're kind of sending them in. So the last question, and we'll go back to Jeff, just following the order we've done, is looking forward into 2019, what do you see your association focusing on, and where would you like to see the association going into the future?
So keeping on this theme of advocacy, 2019 brings a federal election. That's not me.
That was happening yesterday too.
Okay, let's trade.
Okay, sure.
Oh, there we go. Maybe.
Yep, there we go. So and in fact, we're very hard at work right now on that 2019 election. In fact, our board meeting is next week, and our board is reviewing our policy platform. And in fact, meetings have already been set up with some of the party officials to discuss that. So that'll be a big one. I couldn't help but notice a couple of folks have just mentioned.
Let's just trade.
Yeah. Thank you. A couple folks on the poll here have just mentioned Indigenous housing, and again, that remains the big glaring gap in the national strategy and in national policy. We do not yet have a Indigenous housing strategy. There are negotiations currently happening on 3 streams for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. But we have long been advocating for a 4th stream, which is for the. That was a bit of a forward pipe dream. So I mean, those are the issues. We also, though, need to, in order to do that, though, we need to continue down that road of solid research, solid policy development, and the other thing that we really need to do in 2019 is, and I think we've been doing this for some time, but we need to continue again down this road, is make sure we're very aligned and working closely with our stakeholder partners. So that's national groups like the Co-op Housing Federation, the Canadian Alliance on Homelessness, FCM, as well as our provincial counterparts. And this new alliance we've just created hopefully will serve as a vehicle by which to create some stronger bonds. Because, frankly, the more that we're aligned with provincial partners, with national partners, and we're all saying the same thing with one voice, the harder it is to ignore that. And so that alignment and coordination between stakeholders is absolutely key and important.
Great, so I think a few of the things that we're going to be working on through 2019, we have civic elections coming up this week, actually, next week on Saturday. So really working with municipalities to ensure that they can support all the new resources that are coming from the provincial and federal governments. Educating councils on municipal tools like, donating land, zoning for rental tenure, working in partnership with the nonprofit sector to get new units built. Combating NIMBYism in communities, things like that. We also have the federal election coming up, so there's going to be a lot of advocacy efforts around that. We're going to be updating our rental housing index with federal electoral districts, so you'll be able to obtain rental housing information in there. And then just monitoring our progress. We have all these new resources coming online, and we need to understand what's being built where, and we need to be able to hold the government accountable and really understand if we're meeting the targets that we've set out in our affordable housing plan and otherwise.
So a couple of the things that we're working on this year, 2018 and 2019. This year, 2018, we actually also have municipal elections going on actually this fall in Ontario. So we're using some of the stuff that we put together on our provincial affordable housing plan and working with municipal councillors and those up for election to talk about how that's going to play out at the municipal level. In Ontario, we are a little bit different in that a lot of the funding for housing is now down to the municipal level. So they have a big role to play in community-based housing and social housing. We're also looking at the federal election in 2019 to see how we can advocate for affordable housing at the federal level. And we're also going to be trying to prepare our members to take advantage of the National Housing Strategy. So one piece we're working on is as I mentioned, the Ready, Set, Rebuild course, which ties into place to the National Housing Strategy Co-Investment Fund. So our initial feedback from our members on that fund is that it is quite difficult to actually hit all of the criteria that is in the scoring to get funding from that stream and to build and to make the development financially sustainable. So as our board at MNPHA has had conversations with CMHC about some of the feedback we've received from our members and some of the problems we see in that program. So we're raising concerns with CMHC, and we hope to see some improvements at that level in terms of how that program has been rolled out right now. But we are helping our members to gain capacity on new development As an example, my organization in Windsor, Essex, we did apply a project to the National Co-Investment Fund. We have yet to hear back if we're successful or not, but it was quite an undertaking for my own organization. And we have almost 5,000 units, a $42 million budget, so we're a large organization, and it was difficult for us to put that application together and to go through all of the hoops that you have to go through to even apply. So when we look at our membership, my organization, Windsor Essex, is one of the larger ones in out of MNPHA's members. If we look at our members who have 20 units or even 200 units or 300 units, that is quite difficult to actually get to a place where you can develop new with those hurdles being there. So that's a big piece that we're looking at. We're very excited that the National Co-Investment Fund is there and that there's some funding out of that, but we are concerned as to whether or not members can actually access that. So that's going to be a big point of focus for us next year.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the formal questions for our panel. We do have some time left, so if anybody from the audience has any questions from our panelists, I think there's one microphone. Fingers crossed it works.
Just a quick question. Membership in like MNPHA's version, is that like some national associations, if you join the provincial association, you're automatically a member of the national? Is that such an agreement in place here?
No. to put it mildly. No, and you're right. I've actually worked at other national associations where that's the case. That's not the case with us. We've had very preliminary conversations that's actually started with Alberta about entering into some kind of an arrangement like that. But we at present haven't pursued that and haven't really talked about that yet in Manitoba. There's advantages to that though, and so that I think down the road may be a model we might be looking at.
I got this one on, so we'll see how long we can make it. Anybody else have any questions?
Jeff, could you maybe talk a little bit more about how the vision is kind of rolling out for the Technical Resource Center and kind of how that's ideally supposed to shape up?
I could update you on what's happening with the Technical Resource Center, but then I'd have to kill you all before we leave here. I have to be a little careful with what I say. Essentially, the Technical Resource Center, it was the only piece of the National Housing Strategy that CMHC issued an RFP for to get an external service provider to run it. So they've said, we don't want to run this thing. And so earlier this year, when the RFP was released, CHRA, national group representing the co-ops, as well as actually I think both of you and a couple other associations put in sort of a joint bid to run this thing. And I can't say yet how that bid has turned out, although you might be able to read between the lines when I say I was in negotiations on Friday. But essentially the model of it is that, so let's say if you as a provider in Winnipeg would like to pursue some transformational activity, or let's say you want to amalgamate with another organization, or you want to improve your financial viability, or whatever, anything that your organization wants to do to improve its governance or its operations or so forth, but you just don't have the technical resources available to do that. You can approach this center. They will put you in touch with experts who can help provide some of those technical expertise services to you as an organization. And the approach or the model that we've suggested is that would be a hub and spoke model. So in other words, you would sort of approach the national center. They would put you in touch with a regional representative who would essentially, communicate with you on what those services would be. The other piece of it is there would be a grant component. So let's say hypothetically, your organization wanted to merge with another association, and in order to do that, you needed some resources or some money to pay for, like, let's say, legal or consulting. This Technical Resource Center will offer that grant opportunity, so you can apply and get some money to help you do that. There's a third piece of this, and it doesn't really fit, but I think they just wanted somewhere to put it, called the tenant initiative, and this will be also a grant program whereby tenant groups can apply for money to help them engage more on policy or program development. So it's intended really for your own tenant. If you have tenant associations or tenant groups within your buildings, they can apply for grants through this thing. So it was supposed to have been announced this summer. It will probably be announced, I would guess, within a couple weeks, and probably be up and running sometime in 19.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, I certainly want to thank all of our panelists for an excellent discussion. Certainly, food for thought for Christina, provides her with a lot of direction. I also want to thank all of you for participating so actively. All of that feedback will certainly go back to Christina and her board to talk about what's next for MNPHA. So again,